Person from New York State United Teachers. Thanks so much for doing this. We appreciate it. Obviously, this is a big time of year for you. Let's start with universal pre-K. I know that that's obviously one of the big initiatives from the governor this year. From your standpoint, where does that fit in everything, and how do you feel about it?
We are really excited that the governor has put such a significant investment, over $400 million in additional money to make universal pre-K truly universal. This is a program that was started over 25 years ago, and it still hasn't reached every four-year-old. Our data shows that there are about 50,000 four-year-olds that didn't get served through the state program this year. And we think that having a goal of getting it to true universality is critical. One of the things that we are focused on is making sure that parents have access to universal pre-K in their public schools. When you have UPK in your local elementary school, you are much more likely to opt in and to make use of that educational program. Daycare is fantastic, but pre-K is an educational program.
There's some that upstate specifically are concerned that right now it's just going to be down in New York City, at least to the beginning of this rollout. Where does that fit for you? How would you address some of that as we move forward, as those upstate are also looking for this?
Yeah, so currently pre-K is universal in New York City. In fact, they're moving toward 3K universality, and it's amazing. We think that that should be the same across the entire state of New York. And the governor has said that this is the first step, and we are committed to making sure that we follow through until we have true universality, not just with pre-K, but with childcare as well.
For pre-K, I know this is something else with childcare, but also on the pre-K side too, the workforce, and that's you. At the end of the day, what does the pipeline look like? Are there enough people, teachers, to facilitate this?
There is, in fact, a teacher shortage, and we are critically focused on those shortage areas that are the highest, right? So science teachers, math teachers, for the most part, secondary teachers. There's not a shortage of elementary or early childhood education teachers at this point, and so we believe that we have enough to fill that workforce in the elementary schools. What we're going to see a shortage is in people who are providing childcare. Across the state, the average wages for childcare workers are poverty wages. They are not suitable to support a family. And so until we start to address those low wages for childcare workers, we're not going to see the type of staffing levels that we really need.
So you mentioned the wages there. That's an investment. That's looking at different ways, obviously, to incentivize as well, and recruitment, right at the end of the day.
Correct. A
Yeah.
lot of childcare positions across the state right now are paying $18 an hour, right? That is not a wage that you can support a family on.
Okay, let's. But we're talking about things like that. One of the big ones this year for you is fixed tier six, and that for a couple of years now you've been rolling, kind of moving towards this as being a higher and bigger priority. Why?
Well, our newest public employees across New York State have a pension, a retirement that they pay more for. They have to work longer. And then when they retire, they get less. So it's really a matter of fairness and a matter of making sure that every person who commits their life to public service gets a dignified retirement. And we've been saying for years, 30 years is a career. People should be able to retire and enjoy those golden years. And so the fact that new state employees and public workers don't have that benefit is something that we're trying to fix.
This goes back to changes made in 2012, right? When it comes to this.
Yes. So
Yes.
Yeah,
Go
go
on.
ahead.
But yeah, so my question was just going to be, what have you seen? Sometimes we hear about policies and you don't really know the impact or what's happened until years down the road. That's 14 years later. What is your perception of what's happened since then?
So since then, we've been working to get parity with Tier 4, the previous pension tier, and we've been able to get significant changes in terms of vesting, right? So moving from 10 years back to 5 years. We have a significant change in terms of the final average salary, moving it from 5 years to 3 years. These are major steps forward, and we are hopeful that this year we're going to have another big change to improve that system.
What is your response to the budget watchdogs, some of those that say this is going to cost the taxpayers hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars at the state, local, and level there?
There are fewer and fewer people who would deny that we don't need to fix tier six. Even Andrew Cuomo, who created it, has come out and said we need to fix tier six. And many, many employers across the state, county executives, mayors, people who are trying to hire people, the state comptroller, they're saying, you know what, we're having a hard time recruiting people into public service. And if we don't fix tier six, it's not going to be fixed. So there's a lot more people who are now on board with this than we've seen in the past.
I won't ask you to balance the budget, but would there be any concern if tier six was changed, if that could change at all, what you see for foundation aid, for example, for school? You know what I mean? Because that there's levels, and you see the budget director, and they're looking for savings and ways, and I know that could be one element of that. Is there any concern there on your end?
We are not concerned about that. We live in a state that has tremendous resources. And if there's a need for us to generate additional revenue to fund our schools and public servants, then we should do that.
That gets us to the foundation aid formula. And do you believe that the state should have already implemented more of what the Rockefeller Institute put out when they did that review a couple years ago?
There's a lot for the state to do in terms of updating. There are many elements of the formula, and we're just getting started. Last year, we were able to update the poverty weightings. We were able to update some of the regional cost adjustments. Right now, we need to do more, and on top of what the governor has proposed, and we'll be talking to the legislature about doing that and testifying to that fact this week. So I would say we're going at the pace that we're going. It's never fast enough. There are too many districts who are getting only a 1% increase across the state of New York, and we need to do something about it. But we understand that the state is doing it gradually, and we're comfortable with that.
So some have already come out and said that 1% increase is below for them inflation, which means it's not really an increase. How are you managing that?
Well, there are 461 school districts that are getting a 1% increase. And I would bet you every single one of them will tell you it is not enough. Inflationary pressures and affordability are something that everybody is talking about. And we need to make sure that the funding that our schools get is keeping up with that pace of inflation.
Obviously, this was such a big conversation, when the governor originally made some of these proposals a couple of years ago, and then obviously there was an outcry. You could say that. At this point, is this, you said you have to do more. What does that look like today and for this next budget? What is more for you that you'd actually feel better about?
We need more of a minimum increase guaranteed. 1% is insufficient. We need additional weightings for English language learners, for homeless students. And specifically, we also need to talk about this regional cost adjustment. We only adjusted it for certain areas of the state. There are other areas of the state like New York City, which didn't account for the fact that the cost of living in New York City has significantly changed since the data that we're using. So those are a few examples. We understand that everything isn't going to happen this year, but we need to move forward on quite a few of those.
How does this add up? The governor, she mentioned this in her budget presentation. I thought it was interesting. She said something as funding doesn't guarantee outcomes. Does this conversation help those outcomes moving forward? Because that's been some of the questions about how the funding and where it's going, and if you're getting the most bang for the buck, as we know how much the state spends.
Well, I would say schools are doing more than they ever have, right? Our schools are the center of community. They have become the social safety net for entire communities. Our schools are now feeding kids, clothing kids. We have food and clothing, shelter, healthcare, mental health. We are one-stop shopping for entire communities. And the fact that our funding has increased is largely because we have taken on a greater role in supporting communities. It does not mean that our outcomes are necessarily tied to that.
Let's get to technology now. That was obviously a big rollout with the device restrictions. I know that I think there was the governor had come out and said it's working, so far. How do you measure that?
Well, there are people who are actually studying it and collecting data, but I would tell you, as I visit schools across the state, which I do every week, people are telling me, wow, kids are laughing and talking in the hallways again. Our lunchrooms, kids are sitting around playing cards and engaging with each other in ways that they haven't done since phones were invented, right? There's an ability to focus that our teachers are reporting in terms of their students actually listening and doing their work during class. It has made such a difference already, and we're only a few months in.
Yeah, obviously, I think we've seen New Jersey. I think they also now are going to. I think they're going to do it next, which I think is really interesting as it's starting to pick up momentum. At the end of the day, how can you take us a little more inside how teachers have been navigating that when it comes to the process and what it's been like for them in terms of how as it's something else that they have to think about when they try to get rid of them and put it back. With all that in mind. Because I know when this was rolled out, there were some concerns about emergencies and things of that nature.
For the most part, what has been so successful is the fact that we now have district-wide policies. And so we don't have different people have different rules for different kids. And so those clear expectations, which kids thrive on, are making it so that kids actually are following the rules. And in terms of us being the phone police, which is something that we were experiencing before the ban, we now see less and less of that as an issue, and kids have adjusted extremely well to not having their phones. They figured out how to reach their parents if they need to, and everything seems to be going extremely well.
The governor's made, obviously a big deal about protecting kids online. More initiatives trying to roll them out for different apps and algorithms. How does that impact a child in school if they're not seeing that, or if they are, or vice versa?
The governor's made a priority of protecting kids online. And so she's already got a number of bills passed that protect kids from addictive algorithms, protects their data so that companies aren't targeting them. And then she's now focused on a bill that will protect kids from strangers contacting them, potential predators online. And we couldn't be more supportive. I'm a parent of middle schoolers, and I worry all the time about making sure my kids are on Roblox, and I don't want strangers reaching out to them and engaging them in conversations. But as a parent, I don't necessarily know how to keep those parental controls tight, and so this law that she's proposing will help parents do that.
Yeah, and that's the next thought I have is the education for older people, right? Not old people, but people that are older that might obviously everyone grew up a little bit differently with technology, but where does that come into play? Maybe not. It's not in this bill because I know I've read it and I know there's some different restrictions and things. But like when it comes to educating parents, how do you get through to them to help them understand what is out there? Even I mean I don't understand everything that the kids on the TikTok and like I don't even know what Roblox is. How do you get through to parents when it comes to that?
I mean, it really is about engaging parents and then providing tools and education to them about how to keep their kids safe online. For parents, often the kids are ahead of us in terms of understanding this technology. They know how to find workarounds to the things that we set up. When I tried to set up my kids' parental controls, I was Googling and I found, oh, how to get around your parents' parental controls, right? Like, so kids and the ability to look things up on the internet is making it very hard for parents to stay ahead. We need experts to be helping support parents in doing this work, and we need laws to put guardrails on these companies so that they put those protections in place too.
All right, final one is just about federal policies and the current administration. Anything you're watching there that could have an impact that you're responding to?
I would say the biggest thing that's impacting our members and their families is the increase in ICE out in our communities. While there has not been a lot of ICE going into schools, what we are seeing is that families are being removed from schools, from communities, and it's impacting the school community. People are afraid, people are concerned, they're worried about their friends, their neighbors, their community members, and there's a fear, I think, that's been created by that climate. And so that's the biggest thing from the federal level that's impacting our schools.
And I think one of the governor's proposals is to help keep those types of officials away from sensitive places. Are schools part of that, I think, potentially? Yeah.
They are,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
And it's important because we're watching what happened in Minnesota, where the state law prohibiting access to schools was ignored. And so we're concerned about that same thing happening here in New York.